Dawntrail came out a couple of weeks ago. We've had some time to finally digest the story, give it some thought, let it simmer. Because if you rush in too quickly, you get the whole internet being like, this is the worst expansion ever, and I'm going to cancel my subscription. And then you have people who decide that two-headed guy.
Bakul
Bakul Jaja.
Then you also have people who think that Bakul Jaja is the sexiest thing to ever walk the earth. And that's become a thing. So we're going to try and move most of that to the side and just have a conversation about what we think Dawntrail did wrong, what we think it did right, and how can it basically improve in the future. Cheery, I know while you enjoyed the expansion, you did have a number of criticisms.
The pacing for the first half, I understand that it was trying to introduce an entire new setting and different cultures, whilst also relaying into the background story of like the history of the country and one of the main characters, i.e. Bul Jaja.
Yeah,
and the pacing for that was a bit boring. And also, I think overall, so some people complained. When do they not? Some people complained that that you didn't feel like the main character. I was completely fine with that, especially because it was meant to be our vacation, and we're just there to mentor and help Wuk Lamat along her journey of ascension to the throne and, spoilers, eventually protecting her people from a grandiose threat. However, we didn't do any mentoring.
There will be plenty of spoilers, by the way. So
we didn't really do any mentoring. We were just standing there, and I would have been perfectly fine with being a background character in this if we just had actual like input in Wuk Lamat's growth as a person and as a ruler, as a queen. In addition to that, I think the second half was more interesting in terms of concepts. But again, it feels like the expansion is disjointed between two parts, and there wasn't enough time to really explore different characters and different concepts. They were trying to jam so much in to set up the next 10-year story arc, holistic story arc. And unfortunately, this expansion was the victim of its own premise. It needed to set up a new major story, and in doing so, it hopefully, my point here is made true. It crawled so the future expansions could walk and fly.
My criticisms, I would say, come with a couple of things. The Wild West area, while cool, definitely was a real kind of pacing disjointed thing. Like I was like, all right, I'm cool, Mesoamerican, everything's great. Now I'm in the Wild West.
To me, it kind of feels like the area, like 80% of what you did there was just, we have a zone, so we need to do something in the zone.
Yeah. So
and it never really feel like it should have been the bridge between part 1 and part 2, but it just really wasn't until right near the end where shit happens. And
it was a filler episode.
And the next story, the next chapter, the next story begins.
Other criticisms I would throw out there, if I had to pick some, because I really enjoyed my time with Dawntrail. I enjoyed all the characters. I like them. I'm generally a pretty positive for a new MMO guy. That's what I do. But as outside of Shinoa, I would say that I kind of have to agree with Cheery's point a little bit on the mentoring thing. Now, I know why you would do it off camera, or off screen, is because each Warrior of Light is potentially different. You know, a Paladin is going to mentor different than a Red Mage, mentor different than a Bard or a White Mage, and while there might be some central themes, I will say that I liked the idea that, you know, one, with Wuk Lamat growing as a person, you know, like her initial she only grew on me. Like her initial, I'm strong and invincible and I can be the third promise. When that facade annoyed me, but once she opened up and became real, it was like, and then real character growth. Yeah, had some criticisms.
I kind of agree with most of that. For me, probably I'm far more positive about the story than Cheery is in that. While I agree the start was slow, I did enjoy being in those locations and learning about what went on there, and I do feel there will be, especially in like the Allied Society quests, that there will be more built upon those. But There's definitely a disconnect between the first part of the story and the second, much like there was in Stormblood. But I enjoyed the story a lot more than I did in Stormblood, especially the second half. I loved everything that happened in the second half. Otis, there's stories, even in the first half, Konoha, there's characters that are introduced there that I think are really strong and will probably still stick around for like most of the expansion. And I don't feel as negatively about like how a lot of the stuff was approached, except that I do think one of the villains could have been a little more fleshed out. He just got thrown off the edge of the of the thing, and like just unceremoniously. Probably my biggest criticism is the Scions. I felt like they were, for the most part, almost completely peripheral to the story. Ishtola, despite her terrible microphone, was useful for the story. Graha was useful, and Alice had a lot to do during the events. She's a good voice of passion against the more reasoned members of the group. But everybody else served basically no purpose. Like, Estinian is like, oh, I'm just traveling. Kryl and Erinville, absolutely amazing to see them getting more focus, and we'll get onto that in the positives.
The positives, yes, highly agree with the dungeons. Thematically, they're interesting. Level design, I mean, the dungeons in MMOs have normally always been linear, so that's not necessarily a thing I can criticize it without criticizing the genre. But thematics varied, interesting. I also liked the mechanics. There was not necessarily new mechanics, but the way they were implemented were quite new. And the way that the arrangement of those mechanics was new and not necessarily fresh, but interesting.
I feel like they were a lot fresher. Like, even if there's a sense of like, this is kind of like something, they were doing them like one of the bosses where you had like 10 different barriers and you had to dodge around the barrier while the floor is being napalmed. And I just, especially as a healer, oh my God, try that shit as a healer. Then you'll know what...
that's organics.
It felt it's not as like, it's not just like pattern, ability, dodge, heal. It like there was a certain sense of repetition to how things were structured, which I think is completely gone in this.
Sort of as a semi-positive, I liked the
semi-positive.
That's where
good.
I liked the thematic variety of the environments. Even if the environments themselves weren't necessarily that interesting.
Oh my God, sorry.
Yeah, mechanics. I like Wuk Lamat as a character.
Wuk is great. Yeah.
So Wuk Lamat, she is the classic, Naruto character. Like, friendship will solve everything. I don't mind that, but it was a bit too simple and unrefined. However, that being said, I do like her as a character. I do think she has a charm to her, and I think there's a lot of characters that had a charm to them, not necessarily depth, but they were at least interesting in their own right.
Any criticism against like the voice acting, I think, is entirely on the voice direction and not on her personally, because when she's trying to be like awkward and dorky, for lack of a better word, she nails that emotion perfectly. But we all know that one scene. Sveen, listen
to me.
You definitely feel like someone, whoever was in the directing chair, they probably just thought she was like standing in the room, like across the table from someone or something. But she is absolutely excellent. Maybe a little less of her in the story, but I do want her to continue to be around and influence things. Nim.
Okay, so first off, I absolutely adored Wuk Lamat. Cenebrier honestly delivered a great performance. But I identify with the shonen or comic book hero protagonist who's trying their best and through effort will brute force their way into success and try to bring everybody along in happiness and grow. That resonates with me a lot, just a lot. And also, I loved the fact that one of my favorite parts with Wuk Lamat was when she admits that she's not perfect and then she starts to do it again. It's like, no, I said I would do this. and then just keeps on trying. Then culminating with, not culminating, but building to the fight with Bakul Jaja, who bullies her in the story. Eventually, her minions are like, hey, through plot, are like, oh yeah, we got somebody. And they look at the Warrior of Light like, oh, we don't want that smoke. It's like, correct, you do not want that smoke. But then, she's like, well, it's my fight. You take on Bakul Jaja, and you humble that dude. Then you go toe-to-toe later with Zorelja, and you don't win, but you hold your own. And then you break through an AI reality, which I'm always for breaking AI. I think that's important. And then
Digital is bad. Yeah.
And then she literally is like, tank buster, yes, got it. And while I don't necessarily like the direction that was given to her for Sven, listen to me, I understand what's going on, because Wuk Lamat Wuk Lamat is a forgiving, kind, caring, involved person. Wuk Lamat would help you paint your fence or carry your groceries, because that's just who she is. She's just a nice person. And as the head of Resolve, she takes action. Her action is, well, why are we standing around? There are people hungry. There's people injured. That's
exactly why we have Kwana. He's the head of reason.
Yeah.
To her Resolve. He's the head of reason. And that was the whole point of the story, that maybe one person can't do it alone. Maybe you need people. Maybe you need people beside you to understand things better. And I think that's a very good and quite unique message to have. And it's not just the power of friendship. It's that you need friendship to actually help you be a full and complete person. And
also for tonal shift, right? Because I played Shadowbringers and Depression Walker, and there was a lot of sadness in there, and I'm nice. It's nice to see a tonal shift. Now there was a little dissonance. Again, it's not a perfect game. But I happen to really like it. I thought the raid content was fun. I thought the dungeons were great. I play as a tank, so there were times where it's like I gotta move and I gotta learn the stuff. And anybody who watches me play knows that I am very, very keen on never receiving a Vaughn stack, because I executed the mechanic correctly. The trials have been amazing and challenging, and the raids have been fun.
Yeah.
It's one of the. Honestly, I think that if Dawntrail is the launching point, as Cheery had mentioned, to crawling so that other expansions can walk and eventually fly, this is a pretty good launching point. I know I couldn't do better.
Speaking of which, since this is a launching point, the question is, now that we've got like the hints of like the crown is still around, might have some sort of involvement in the future. We have the whatever the hell that thing is supposed to be. It looks like a cup.
The key.
The key, thank you. To potentially travel easily to other reflections. Before we get on to further expansions or further stories, what do you think we're going to see in the next patch, which is probably only a few weeks away? What do you think is going to happen in the story next, basically?
I'm not sure, but I like to speculate reasonably that it could focus on the Wuk Lamat and Kwana getting to grips with ruling a nation, especially a nation in mourning, a nation that have just been assaulted by mysterious power. And I think also you'll have the Scions, or at least some of them, regarding the key or the hourglass, as I call it, researching that. Highly unlikely to do this, but if it went to, we kind of already done it, but if it went to different worlds as well, because it touched upon all these different civilizations that died out for different existential reasons.
For what it's worth, the lifestyle content is going to have you colonizing other planets, so that's going to be interesting. Instead of just having an island, we're like, let's just go to space and colonize planets. So that's going to be touched on somewhat. I feel like Bakul Jaja is going to become like her own personal Vegeta. Totally got it right. And going to be like just the asshole of the group that helps, but is still a complete asshole. And I think it's going to be entertaining because it's a dynamic that's never really been in the Scions. Got it right first time.
All right.
Nim.
So for me, we have that reckoning. If you remember the Sky Deep Cenote dungeon, there is a lot of pain in the Mamulja culture that may need to be reconciled, because they're
Good
going
point, yeah.
in one point they went from we have to be militarily mighty, and we have proof of that with Galul Jaja, because he's the strongest, he's the only one who could help defeat the Sky Ruin, to now Bakul Jaja being like, what if it's too much? It costs too much. So there's a legacy of pain there that you could develop. Also, Kwana mentions that we've not yet explored all of Tural, and you still have strife below the surface with Tuliolal.
We're getting all the content, the open zones, the lifestyle stuff, raids, alliances, Manderville, all that. Nothing's going to be untouched in this expansion. It's going to be like the most dense content we get. The new open zones always tend to be the real long-term content. Are you excited for the future of Final Fantasy XIV? I will close by mentioning that Yoshida actually did an interview recently where he fully admitted to the flaws in the story. And I have to admire him for like actually speaking out and saying like, so yeah, there were certain elements where if we'd approached it this way, this could have worked more strongly. He fully understands like where this could have worked better and this could have been more enjoyable, like having Wuk Lamat be more proactive. I think that's a good sign because it shows that as we go further, they will focus on that stuff. Give me more Graha Tia. Just give me the Graha Tia expansion. We can just call it Final Fantasy XIV Graha Tia, and I will pay my subscription forever. Those are my closing
thoughts. We still never
thoughts.
got our tacos.
Feel free to comment down below. Let us know what you thought of the expansion. If YouTube is nice with the algorithm and actually shows it to you people. Take care of yourselves and stay beautiful. Hey there, folks. I know nobody wants to listen to a creator shill themselves for 90 seconds, so I'm not going to. If you enjoyed this, we do the show live every Sunday on Twitch at 6 p.m. BST. Feel free to pop over TNEQL. And if you would like to support us in making the channel bigger and helping it grow, you can also check us out on Patreon, also as TNEQL. Take care of yourselves. Stay beautiful.